Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Tate for another spoiler discussion, the spoiler discussion of the summer. Of course, we are here talking Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, now out in cinemas worldwide, and we're going to give our spoilerific thoughts on another discussion as part of the Mission Impossible retrospective. Got as much info as we can get from its opening weekend. We've got some box office numbers. We've got some stunts details. We've got all the big story points. So do get involved. But before we get into anything else, Tate, how are you doing tonight?
Yeah, doing good, doing good. We are now, I'd say, almost halfway through our summer box office run. We've made it to a big kind of jump in films. We've got more films coming out later on this week. So we're right in the meat of it now, and it's time we talk about the big guns. And this is the first big gun, I guess, of the box office summer season.
Absolutely. And as always, anyone watching at home, please do comment with your thoughts on Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. Now, this is a spoiler discussion. You can bring up anything you want. We've done a spoiler-free review. We've done the whole series. It's been out almost a week here in the UK. I think America opened on Wednesday. Other places, sort of Monday to Wednesday. We'll talk about that with the box office section because we've got its numbers, which is going to be interesting given what's come out today and some very odd American outlets dressing it up. And then, yeah, we want to hear from everybody. So anything you enjoyed, things you didn't like, did this disappoint? Did this exceed expectations? We're going to go through it. We're going to go through all of it. So it's probably going to be, we haven't discussed length, but it's not going to be no time to die at all. It's not going to be 4 hours. And as always, if you want to get us on social medias, you can get us on Twitter and Instagram at cinema_savvy, Facebook and theirboys.com/cinema savvy with a link to Redbubble in the description below. But Tate, as we always do with these Mission Impossible ones, take us through the IMDb plot synopsis.
I mean, I'm reading and I'm laughing. It's very short. It's very succinct and to the point. Ethan Hunt and his IMF team must track down a dangerous weapon before it falls into the wrong hands. That's it. And once again, I feel like I've said this a few times now about some of the Mission Impossible plot synopses on IMDb. They don't really explain the film like they're talking about. They could literally explain any of the Mission Impossible films. They're very vague. They don't go into high detail. They're very short. And genuinely, that could be the plot synopsis for any of the previous Mission Impossible films. Literally every single previous Mission Impossible film.
Yeah, and I think when you're 7 films in at this point, it's very understandable that some are drawn out, some aren't, and it just needs to be where it is. And it doesn't even push the part 1. It doesn't even push the MacGuffin, which we'll talk about, the keys and everything like that. So, yeah, it's going to be fun to get into. And what we'll do, so obviously with the other Mission Impossible reviews, just plugging them for people at home, an amazing series. We had so many great guests. We go through each one from the first one, 96, through to Fallout, and then heading into this one today. We always open up talking about our experiences, our memories with it. Obviously, this is new. We both might see it multiple times at the cinema. Probably not. Who knows? But, this is contextual to the 16th of July, 2023. But if we're going to talk about experience watching it at the cinema, I'll just jump through mine quickly. So, very lucky to be at the press screening, which was on the 4th of July. Scott from Spy Hard was there, so it's great catching up with him and a few other people that have been on our series. Actually, a lot of people that were on our series were on that road. Josh Barton was there. Other people I've just realized who just weren't on the series, but a lot of people we recognise there. It was a big event. Reese, Theo, a few others. And it was at the Odeon in Leicester Square. Now, if anyone's been to that cinema, it's got Dolby Atmos sound, and Dolby Atmos is pretty incredible in the right circumstances. But it wasn't IMAX. It's not an IMAX cinema. And I was always a bit nervous about seeing that film first. I'm very specific with certain film formats. I'd rather watch something in IMAX first and then watch it normally after, vice versa, or all those kinds of things. And I was very, very surprised that it wasn't at Cineworld Leicester Square. And people are curious about how press screenings and what media screenings work. 90% of the time, it's at the Cineworld Leicester Square or it's at the Odeon. Picture House in Central, it can be used sometimes, so can the BFI IMAX. So there's a cool few cinemas where the screens end up being. And I'm just going to say, I was not disappointed with the crowd, with the film. The screen is not a good screen in that cinema. It's a humongous auditorium. We had great seats. But but it wasn't an IMAX, and it sounded great. But visually, I felt like I was missing something, missing that extra bit. And anyway, I think I moaned in the spoiler-free reaction. I think I said that almost as like a thing from the get-go. I didn't watch in IMAX. And then on the Monday, so when it released here on the 10th Monday, I went with my dad. We had tickets booked, 7:30 IMAX showing. Was pretty packed, which I was very surprised by. Releasing on a Monday isn't a thing over here in the UK. We'll talk box office. It's to do with the IMAXs and Oppenheimer and stuff like that. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But much, much, much better on IMAX. Still great film to watch. Second viewing slapped. Some of the stuff I maybe had issues with on that first viewing. The viewing was at ease on the second viewing. It was not more enjoyable. That's the wrong word. But it wasn't thinking as much about the story, what's going to happen next. It was just taking it in and having a blast watching it. And that the IMAX for the big sequences was pretty great. So that's my polite disclaimer. Your experience at the cinema will always come down to where you're watching it, who you're watching it with. All these variables, they do count. They can make up stuff. But what was your screen like? Because I know you had some bad news of your local IMAX.
Yeah, so my local IMAX on, when was it? It was possibly last Sunday or Monday, very early on in the week, decided to close its doors. It was Empire Cinemas. They've gone into administration, and they basically shut their one local to me, which was the only local IMAX. We've got two Cineworlds in our town, on different ends of the town. So I'm hoping that Cineworld do make one of them at least into an IMAX screen. I know the one that's very local to me is a big enough cinema that they could have an IMAX screen. But I would have to travel almost 45 minutes to an hour to actually get to an IMAX screen now for where I am locally, which is a shame. So I had to watch it on a standard screen. And not even in a big auditorium, in a very small auditorium. It was packed to the brim. The atmosphere was actually really, really good. It was also due to my current work, working kind of finishing late and stuff like that. It's very difficult to actually get to cinema screenings and get timings down for film screenings. I know we've had a bit of discussion about how difficult it's been this year from that. But thankfully it was raining, so my work got cancelled, and I went, okay, fine, I'm going to wolf down some food. I'm going to go straight to the cinema and watch it as soon as possible. I really enjoyed the experience, just in general. I know it was a bit of a rush, almost a mission impossible to get there in the end, but no, it was a really, really fun experience being in a packed cinema, not in a massive auditorium. The sound quality is standard for what you'd expect in a small cinema screening, but that suits the screen being, it fit to the sizing. It wasn't like, surround sound, Dolby Atmos or anything like that. It was just standard audio screening, standard visual screening, and it didn't take away from my experience of the film because there was no proportions out there. It wasn't a big screening with lesser sound. It wasn't a small screening with more sound. It was just kind of well balanced and everything like that. But I really enjoyed it. Really energetic screening in the end. One point I will say, on the stunt with the cliff jump, and I know that's what they've been using for their main advertising, the entire screen went completely silent. No one even breathed. It was a really, really cool moment.
That's great. I got it at my first screening. At the second screening, some twat decided to shout, I saw that in the trailer. Which sums up the sort of people that you find at cinemas. When everyone else is, and it wasn't even a kid as well; it was an adult. Yeah, at least, and that's the one really good thing about, I say, press screenings. It's a big thing. Unfortunately, you get a lot of influencers that turn up to them. They're normally a nightmare. They weren't in that. The whole world knows about this stunt. You just know that's the one 20-second window. Just don't speak. Let us finally watch it properly. And I've just got to say that even if you've seen the trailer 100 times, it was still, it hit different. And I don't know if it's the context. We'll get into it, but yeah, it was one of them. And what we're going to try and do, we're going to try to take out of Mission Impossible reviews. So we're going to talk some behind the scenes and production stories, which for those unfamiliar, I mean, it's been on the news a bit today. The budget for this film grew to $290 million. And so I guess our first Indiana Jones comparison of the night, right? Where a lot of these very popular films that are coming out now, some have already been out, had insane budgets, not just because of the cost to make films, to make blockbusters. Yeah. The films that shot specifically throughout the lockdowns, not we finished before, we didn't come back for 2 years. The ones that were let's get this going. Let's try and get this going. Let's make a film. These are the ones that have grown to these $300 million budgets. And it's something no one's talking about. It's really frustrating. And obviously, the production of this film is completely massacred by COVID. I think after Fallout came out, obviously Fallout was the most popular box office recognition, I'd say, amongst the community fans as well. The best Mission Impossible. They're on a bit of a high. And then they were to announce that the next one will be a two-part shot back-to-back. Of course, Chris McQuarrie returning with Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise once more. And, I think I remember when that announcement was done, I was buzzing. Like, oh my God, a two-part Mission Impossible. Supposedly to end the series, which you can't find those details anywhere these days. And there have been comments made about it not being in, that there are other Mission Impossible films plans down the line post part 2. I guess we'll find out in the coming years what's really going to go on there. But as I said, the production was a nightmare for them to do. I'm sure everyone heard the Tom Cruise audio leak. Tayte, you're like me. You've been on sets.
Yeah.
You are fully and contextually on the side of, in this instance, I don't know anyone that was against Tom Cruise when that stuff came out.
No.
This, I believe, and I could be wrong, this was the first blockbuster shooting again. This wasn't one of those crap indie films that, let's do a film about lockdown, like The Bubble, like the other one.
Yeah, I mean, I'll put it this way. Working on various different productions throughout COVID, they are not only constantly testing you for various different things, and you're also being paid for the testing, so that's a massive expense they're having to take on board as well. Yeah. But every single day on set, there has to be a person who's in charge of COVID protocol, a person who's keeping everyone separated. You have to be socially distanced even when on set, and you have to wear masks before takes, and then you have to go through the process of taking off your mask, putting it in a pocket or putting it to one side when you do the take. As soon as they shout cut, the mask goes straight back on, like whilst they're reset. It's a very, very, very kind of long-winded and heavy kind of, production that goes into the productions when COVID was most rampant. The fact that you'd have to take tests, before arriving on set, and then take an immediate test when arriving on set. Like you were just constantly tested to make sure that no one was positive, and so that no one could contaminate any part of it. So his outburst and everything like that, completely warranted, because whoever was not following the rules on that set on that day, like, clearly could have put the production in danger. If they lose out on a week's worth of filming, which did happen on one of the productions that I was on, we lost out on 2 to 3 weeks worth of filming just because people didn't follow the protocols. Suddenly you're losing out on millions, like
daily
daily, for every single day that the production's not taking place. Not only that, but you're then probably going to be put under stricter protocols. It's going to be a lot harder to film. It's going to be a lot harder to do that production. You're behind schedule. There's so many things that go into it. Like, I know a lot of films have shooting windows where they can shoot on certain locations, so that may have come into it as a factor as well. It becomes a whole mess, and this film was hit, hard with COVID. I'm sure that's why its production has inflated as well. We have to take that into consideration now with all of the productions that have come out over the kind of past few years and stuff like that, and how that's affected the filming and everything like that. But yeah, absolutely insane kind of the COVID protocols that would have been in place. So it's and I know that a lot of celebrities came out in support of Tom Cruise and kind of said, look, he's trying to save cinema here. Come on now. I know that he did it with Top Gun Maverick, but he was trying to do it with this film as well.
And he's a producer. Like, people forget that as well, that he's not just like an actor. Like, he produces these films, that if anything happens, where it feeds back into the web of things, it goes to the producer. And it's just one of them where it's almost like taking a shot on memory lane, going through the behind the scenes, because there were so many stories of this. And I remember, I think filming this, I can't get the specific date wrapped. I know that part 2 shot last year. I know that there's some stuff from this, that some stuff that was in these trailers didn't appear in this film, which means that part 2 might have stuff from part 1 still. So it's hard to lock down precise filming details. But the cliff jump, I remember blowing up everywhere. Everyone saw the cliff stuff, and that's why it's at the forefront of marketing. It leaked online. Turned out that was the very first day of filming. And you can watch the amazing 10-minute behind-the-scenes video they released in December. And what you said there, they've all got their masks on. Everything's equipped for that. And I think there's recently interviews McHugh and Tom Cruise basically saying that, not in a jokingly way, get the big stunt done in part one, because if something happens, then you haven't basically made a film after. So, whether they're laughing off the potential death from a stunt like that, I don't know. But it's certainly one that the more stuff comes out about the behind the scenes on this, the train going off the cliff, that was not, I say not too far from it, it's nowhere near me, but like that was Derbyshire, just rural British villages. It, of course, shot at Longcross Studios as primarily. They're still based there with part two resuming, well, part two supposedly resuming filming after the press tour in August/September. Of course, the SAG strike may be very different to that if people are curious. That's just, again, another unknown that's affecting the entire industry. But yeah, safe to say, the production behind this, it wasn't always easy, especially, with this series, there's been a lot of issues with the Mission Impossible films between films, and this one was sort of the icing on the cake. But we had a lot of returning faces for this. And of course, we've mentioned Chris McQuarrie a fair amount. His third Mission Impossible film I guess we could say this put in a minimum of 4. 3 films in, him and Tom Cruise have built up this insane collaboration with one another. And I can't quite put my hand on it at this point in time. I can't remember we spoke about this well during Fallout. Of course, he was returning, but whenever I've seen these two on press together, when they're interviewed, when they're at red carpets, when they're just discussing film, they're on the same wavelength about everything. And I was listening to a really good interview with Simon Pegg today on Light the Fuse podcast. And he spoke about how they operated, that Fallout had a 33-page script to begin with. And then when they were filming, the 33-page script eventually becomes the main script, because they're building their films, they're writing their scripts around the big set pieces, and just how the two of them approach these films is very different. And he actually compared it to Wallace and Gromit,
Yeah.
putting the train tracks in front of the train. He says that's what it's like on a Chris McQuarrie film in a really good way. And I've just got to kind of say with this one, my initial thoughts on the film that kind of stem with the directing is that this is a part 1 of a part 2. And it doesn't feel like it's obviously a spoiler discussion. It's not a cliffhanger. It's not the Deathly Hallows. It's not Spider-Verse. It's not Infinity War. More like Infinity War, because it does tell a definitive story within its own right. But there's something between these two that everything's landing with them. And I just think whether it's producer to director, actor to director combo, it is just working. And the more films they do together, I mean, McQuarrie, of course, involved in Valkyrie. He also wrote Top Gun Maverick as well. He had a writing credit on that one. He's been involved with all of Tom Cruise's projects. I think even The Mummy he has a rewrite credit on, for whatever people want to take that. I'll leave that. But the direction of this one, and I'll say this instantly, actually, I didn't give my initial thoughts on the film, and it sounds really unfair to say this, and I think a lot of people say the same thing. It's obviously not Fallout. Spy has a really good review where they compared Fallout to Goldfinger, and this to sort of Thunderball, that it's the one after Goldfinger, right? It will never be the one before. And once you can get that image out of your head, it's so much more welcoming. And I'm kind of...
that. I wouldn't even compare it to that.
Do you know what this one feels like? It feels like the very first Mission Impossible film with the modern day stunts of the recent ones with the action edge. And that's a really pathetic way to look at it, but this felt like the most it's come back to being an espionage film in a very long time. I know there's a lot of exposition, there's a lot of MacGuffins, there's a lot of talk, all those sorts of things. Some people don't like some of that, which is fine. And I know that some people have been criticizing the opening exposition scene in the war room type thing. But sort of weighing into this for the third film, I'm glad it's not trying to be Mission Impossible Fallout. I'm glad they're doing a different story. They're telling a grand story, because I think it's pretty incredible. And that's a really lame way of expressing that enthusiasm. But I just think there's something about Chris McQuarrie and Tom Cruise where they feel like a proper actor-director combo. And I'm not... It's too easy for me to like jump at a Chris Nolan, right? People will say like, oh, Nolan and Cillian Murphy's like, well, he's about to lead his first film. Nolan and Michael Caine, supporting actor combo. And I'm not going to be like comparing it to Scorsese and Leo, but it very much feels like it's a collaboration between the two. And I'm trying to put my hand on some sort of actor-director combos like
Bill
that.
Murray and Wes Anderson, I guess. I mean, anyone in Wes Anderson. You could go Wilson and Wes Anderson. You could go Jason Schwartzman and Wes Anderson.
It's like, has the action genre had this. I say that because I'm trying to think like. It's weird. I'm in a really weird vibe of this. Does what I
I
said
mean,
make sense? Like they're
if
like
you're
a power duo.
counting like the spaghetti westerns, kind of,
Yeah,
Sergio Leone, like you could go down that route. But I mean, it's clear to see that Chris McQuarrie is now the Mission Impossible director. I think it's going to be very hard for him to shake off. I don't even think he would want to shake off the image of being the Mission Impossible director, because he's done such a good job of it over the last 3 films that you wouldn't really want to give it to anyone else now. He's kind of taken that role and he's just going to run with it all the way through now. I can't see anyone else directing a Mission Impossible film until the series finishes. He has that locked down. Whether there's one more film left in the franchise, whether there's more to come, and his kind of his what he's been able to build with Tom Cruise and what Tom Cruise has been able to build off with these films, I guess ever since it was rebooted into Ghost Protocol and they kind of went away from the numbers and have now gone with the names of the films. It's just been built up over time, and every single film that comes along, whether he's working with McQuarrie or whether he's working with another director, he's been able to push the boundaries of what you can do with cinema, what you can do with stunts, and what you can do with various different things. But what McQuarrie has brought on board is that unreal connection between the two of them. Just knowing exactly what they want from the film and putting it to screen, bang, straight away there. Like no real issues with it. Just we're going to talk about this stunt. We're going to put this into the film. This is how the story's going to go. This is how it's going to proceed. And I think this is the first time where I can truly say that this has clicked better than before. Because as much as I enjoyed Fallout and as much as I enjoyed kind of the action behind Fallout, I really like the slow burn nature to this film. Now, this is a film with loads of stunts and loads of sequences. Yeah. This has like a 20-minute long car chase. To call this a film a slow burner is crazy. But this film sets up a lot of exposition at the start, a lot of spy work involved in this film, and it's less of an action film, and you can definitely tell that it's a two-parter. Without it having a cliffhanger at the end, you know it's a two-parter because they're taking more time to explain everything that's needed. It feels like it's going to have continuation to it, even like 20 minutes into the film. You're like, they're setting up something bigger than what they've done before here. They've really taken their time to express every single detail so that we are fully aware that by the time part 2 comes out, it's all going to come together. We know exactly what's going on by the end of part 1. There's no mystery that's left over, or little bits of mystery, droplets of mystery that's going to be left over before we move on to part 2. But this film needed to be that kind of slow burn. It couldn't have been action all the way through, and then the next film is action all the way through, because at that point it just becomes mindless action. And I know that people have criticized this film for that, but this film needed to have that exposition. This film needed to have that slow burn. And I'm sure that Tom Cruise would have talked to Chris McQuarrie over this and kind of gone, look, we need this to actually burn a little bit slower than normal. We're going to have a longer start. We're going to have a longer kind of sequences in the film, and a lot more talking, a lot more setup, a lot more character development for every single character involved. Like every single main member of the team, I'd say bar Benji, had major amounts of kind of like character development, long speaking, long talking and stuff like that in the film, which is 100% needed. So it's fascinating what they've been able to do with this film.
Yeah, and I think as well, credit to them, they really need to keep the story under wraps, because jumping in, obviously the villain of this film, it's AI, right? It's the entity. It has basically the opening scene to see it in action, and then the follow up to explain what it can do for those that just don't get it. And immediately when they mentioned AI, I didn't laugh, not in a cruel way, at the cinema. And I know that some people went like AI as a villain. I'm not like pro AI. Just I know that's become a bit more of a thing recently, but it's sort of adequate that what can Tom Cruise take on in the year 2023? Of course, it's AI. Could it be any more contextual to the SAG strikes and the WGA strikes? It is like the most not perfect thing to have, because again, some people will say AI has been around too much recently in more recent films. Paul Kleinsman on the channel did a tweet saying it's like, this film was almost like a Terminator film, which I completely get that as well. And I just thought, credit to them, that if this had come out before the film was released, everyone would be all over it. But actually, I really enjoyed the concept of it in this, and what it's doing, and it it feels very old school, like the AI is evolving. But I love the fact that the ideas for it are the film becomes a chase film.
Mm.
Every government, and it's set up so easily, every government wants the two keys. Well, we think we have half of the two keys, but every government wants them. It's the ultimate power to have control over this thing. And the main rival to these governments is the same thing trying to take itself. And I just love the whole point of the story is it's like, what's the one thing on this world that the future time predicting AI is afraid of? It's afraid of Tom Cruise.
Mm.
And I just thought, you know what? To me, I'll take that. Like, some people might not like that. Maybe they might think there's maybe like an ego trip or something, or it's too much, it's too over the top. But for a franchise in which a man can hang off the side of airplanes, crash helicopters, and hang off cliffs,
Well, it's
do
it's
motorbike
a character
jousting,
who beats the odds, and it's a
yeah,
computer program that works only with odds. So of course it's going to be, threatened and frightened by the unpredictability of one man who really doesn't like care whether he lives or dies. He just cares about the mission. He cares
and
about other people living and dying, but not himself.
exactly. And his objective for the film being, I want to destroy the AI when no one else has that mindset. I'm really down with that as the story. And I just think, again, if you're creating the stakes of this two-part film, you know, part of me thought, oh, is Sean Harris going to come back? Are we going to get the Apostles and the Syndicate returning for the big
Mm.
two-part? And no, brackets, dot, 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 maybe another year, who knows? But I was just there like, they did well to hide this because this is the sort of thing I thought would be everywhere. They'd have put in trailers. They never did. And ironically, it's everywhere. The sort of, I don't know if you call it the AI of Mordor or something, like when they're in the party and it's got, the blue and it's got the flickering, it's all the logos for the film. It's been everywhere. It's like the note poster that has the alien thing above Stephen
Mm.
Nunn. And I just thought it's exactly what this film needs. And the big moments from this film, and this again comes hand in hand on the second viewing, so many little teasers of the AI stuff is actually there from the get go, and I'm talking minute details. You'll clock on the second viewing. For example, the airport scene. You get a mysterious package. It pops up for 10 seconds and disappears. They bring it back up about 5 minutes later. It's been there from the get go, and it's really interesting how much more you can pick up after already seeing the film. That's kind of how it went to me when I said I noticed a lot more in that second viewing. It's
Mm.
not that you couldn't notice it before, but you're aware of the circumstances of the film. So the smallest bits are going to have these extra moments, and I just think that worked for me. And the whole concept of chasing MacGuffin. So my parents were watching Mission Impossible 3 on Friday, so I joined in. And of course, you get the rabbit's foot, which we never get any details about it. They make jokes in the film. It's classified. We can't tie that. Blah blah blah. That's the MacGuffin of MacGuffins, where it's like you'll never learn anything about it. They're just chasing the objective. I don't mind it in this. Is that we understand why they need both keys. We understand what the keys. We're showing the opening scene of the submarine for that very reason. That we're getting. This is the power this thing can do. Show it to the audience, then have the in-story characters find out at the next meeting about what it's also capable of. I am fine with them chasing MacGuffins. It's a Mission Impossible thing. It always has been. The briefcase with the nukes in Ghost Protocol. Fallout is the three nuclear bomb things. Mission Impossible's always had that, and I have this being no different, where it does function as the MacGuffins. And I like the fact it was them chasing the two keys, because then you're able to bring in not just new characters and settings, but the whole film becomes a chase film. From the get-go, get the keys. You're in the desert looking for a key. You're in Dubai. You're at the airport. You're in Rome. You're in Venice. You're in the Alps, isn't it? Of course, it's sorry.
Yeah.
I thought then I was like, where are they? They go everywhere in this film, and it's a
Mm.
proper blockbuster spy action globe adventure. And I just feel that we've missed that in cinema.
This
We
is
don't have
this
many
is
films.
I mean, like, change the key for an artifact, throw a little fedora on, and suddenly it's Indiana Jones. It's globetrotting, it's adventure, it's exactly what you'd want from this kind of film. And the fact that the next film we've got kind of almost two MacGuffins to get, one team is going to be chasing after the key, and Tom Cruise is going to be literally hunting for Red October. It's like, it's going to be fantastic, and you've set the stakes exactly there. They're searching for two different things, but they're both also searching for each other. So it's I don't want to say it's perfect, but it's very, very good for what it does. And I can understand the criticisms of the film. It isn't, people's vibe that they wanted. It's not what they expected, especially after Fallout. It's a very kind of big key shift, going from that big kind of like non-stop action film to this film, which takes its time, sets itself up, has little kind of not Easter eggs, but things you'll catch on second watch. It's a mystery. You have to solve it yourself as well. And I'm sure there's going to be some things in part two. I mean, we've got a bunch of mysteries that we still need to figure out and stuff like that. Like, exactly where is the submarine? Do they have to find like the second key? Because there was two people with keys, when it came down to it. Like, who was the person who got shot? Why was it, why did Gabriel shoot them? Like, there's so many different mysteries that need to be solved in part two. So it leaves you with enough at the end that you can kind of go back to it and, be wanting the answer to those things.
Yeah, and I think in line of that, the one thing that surprised most about this film, it's not a cliffhanger ending. It's very not independent. It's
the mission was completed. He recovered the key, but now the key holds another mission. Now
it's the quest to the submarine, right? The oh god, I forgot the name of it. In the soundtrack, but it's one of those kind of things where, again, right, when the brain is so used to part ones and part twos, Dune, not really cliffhanger. Yeah, the Sevastopol. We know that's the goal. It's like Mad Max Road. What's the plot of Mad Max Road? A car turns left. What's the plot to Mission Impossible Directing Part 2? Gets to Sevastopol before Gabriel. And I think something as simple as that this film does the big thing with. And we were talking before. We'll talk about, I guess, the big death shortly. But we're like, I think Benji's going to die. We think Ilsa's going to die. It's going to have this depressing ending. It's going to have these big things. There's going to be so much happening. It was none of that. This could have literally, and I was thinking this on the second viewing, I was like, I sort of see Rogue Nation and Fallout as an unofficial double bill. Fallout by itself is an incredible film, but the added contexts of the Syndicate from Rogue Nation is what pushes Fallout to that higher level.
It's Sean Harris in both films, like it's the same villain, so you could say it's a continuation. That works.
And that's what I see with Dead Reckoning. Like, doesn't matter what's going to happen in part 2, it will probably work isolated, and almost all the story points are done except the flashback, which we're clearly going to find out more about. That's almost intentionally the only thing they've not showed us and filled out with this film, which is interesting. And kind of transcending into, we want to talk about some of the characters as well. Ethan in this film, in terms of character arc, I think he's pretty great in this. And one thing that caught me, we'll talk about Hayley Atwell a lot with Grace. This transition into not a mentor role, but he's almost not the point of view character for this film. It is almost Grace that we're joining the story with her, and we're following her to then have the other character arcs wrapping around what she's doing. And I think that's also something that caught me off guard, is that Ethan might not have the most to do, but it puts Tom Cruise in a very different position in this series where, at one point he's trying to pick between, are we going to save Grace or are we going to save Ilsa? And I think his performance in this from story point is great. Of course, his physical performance, the stunt, still unbelievable to be putting his body through that. I don't want to say at his age, like he's an old man, but how many 60-year-olds are going to be doing stunts like this in the near future? He's to put it into context, he's now 4 years older than John Voight was in the first Mission Impossible film, which is insane. But I think this was one of his funniest performances as Ethan Hunt as well, in a really nice way. It felt like the funniest film since Ghost Protocol.
Yeah, he definitely brought a bit more humor to the role than previously. But I guess that's kind of the good on-screen presence he has with Hayley Atwell. Like, they both kind of knock out the park in that sense. They work off each other like really, really well. And just his connection to the team that's been built up, over time, he's able to have those kind of conversations with the rest of the team, and they understand his character, he understands their characters and everything like that. But at this point, it is full on kind of almost method acting. Like, I genuinely believe that Tom Cruise thinks that he can complete the mission, and that's kind of what motivates him to kind of act as he is as Ethan Hunt and act as he is, within the film, doing all the stunts and everything like that. There's got to be no way that he just kind of changes into a different off-screen persona. At this point, Tom Cruise is Ethan Hunt is Tom Cruise, and he puts himself into that character every single time. And in this film, he works it really, really well. The serious moments, you genuinely feel the anger from him. Like when he says, like, if you touch either of them, I will destroy you, I will kill you. You genuinely believe it. At the same time, like his talk with Kittredge towards the start of the film, it's fantastic. You can feel the heat coming off of that conversation, and you know how he feels betrayed and how he feels anger about that and everything like that. But as well, the lighter moments, you know, it feels like, you know, the character that you'd expect Tom Cruise to be off screen and everything like that. So in general, it's a fantastic performance. I don't know where I'd rank it as far as his performances within the entire series. I feel like I prefer his performance in Mission Impossible 3 purely out of the fact that that is a very kind of heavy exposition kind of film, and, you know, heavily talking and heavily acting film.
I think the
This one,
first and third for me are probably
first and third, yeah. But this film he knocks it out of the park as well, because he's given enough in the script, he's given enough to do.
Yeah, absolutely that, and kind of sticking with him. The new recruit, I guess, we'll be talking about is Grace, played by Hayley Atwell. Now, again, back when filming was happening, like not far from me, they shot this at New. I mean, ironically, if anyone's seen the famous Tom Cruise curry photos, that was a massive thing in lockdown. So they were shooting at Birmingham New Street Station, which is like 40 minutes from like me, train wise, I guess. But my sister was in central Birmingham that day, and she texted me like, Mission Impossible's filming in Birmingham. I was like, why the fuck would Mission Impossible want to film in Birmingham for? And then the story came out about Tom Cruise, you know, at the Curry House, and it was in the context of this film. I noticed it on the first viewing. The interior to the airport, when they're in the shopping area, that's Birmingham New Street, because the real life Dubai airport hadn't finished being built yet. So it kind of made sense. I like that sort of weird thing. Not that I go to New Street often at all. Yeah, that was a very. If anyone's not read that story, it's insane. Please read it. It's so funny. It's so random. Yeah, Hayley Atwell was with him in all those photos, the Rome set photos as well. So we knew she's kind of going to jump in this and be in the lead. And she's been on, you know, the marketing at the forefront of the posters as well. I haven't seen many of Hayley Atwell's stuff she's been in. I guess if I'm being honest, it's non-Marvel, so I can't sit here and say it's her best performance. But I will say I was very, very pleasantly surprised at how much screen time she had. And not maybe how much I enjoyed her character, because I loved her character. And one thing this series has done, they very rarely miscast, if they ever do miscast. Normally, everyone who comes on board has amazing chemistry with Cruise and the rest of the team. And that's something that they've really done well, especially in the more recent films, bringing in more and more actors. But I didn't expect Hayley Atwell. She has a fully fledged character arc. It's almost, and I don't want to sit here teasing what's to come. But this is no speculation. This is no reports. This is genuinely how I felt ages. I think Dead Reckoning Part 2 will be the last we have of Ethan Hunt in the lead role in a Mission Impossible film. And I think he'll end up going upstairs to like the head of the IMF type thing. This has been my thoughts for a while. And I did think if they were to carry on this series, you know, all jokes aside about Jeremy Renner, you know, which we knew was the plan 10 years ago to hand the keys to someone else. I was watching this, and on that first thing, I was like, wow, like Hayley Atwell was like, she's had an origin film. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen at all, because there's another actor in this film who was also in Top Gun Maverick, who I'll talk about a little bit later on, who I think is going to get a lot more to do in part 2. But that's what surprised me so much with Grace in this. And I kind of like the fact we didn't just, oh, look, it's another fully trained spy. Like, she had a full character development arc, and I really enjoyed what we got with her in the physical side of it on the stunts. I thought she was great as well. And again, the chemistry of Cruise is just always off the chain.
It's another character who we're kind of viewing the kind of the world of the IMF from the outside looking in. And it's fascinating because we can attach ourselves to that character, kind of being whisked away and being brought into the world and being put into danger in the situations that they're put in. The fact that she's kind of quite sly, she has a very similar background, you know, to Tom Cruise, or at least they kind of say in this film that, you know, Tom Cruise, they kind of pretty much say everyone was a criminal before the IMF kind of, you know, hired them, which is a big kind of...
I do have problems with that. I'm not lying. I do have
knowledge drop right there, just like, oh, you're all ex-convicts? Wow, that's massive. Like, I was not expecting that as like a massive thing for the IMF. Like, every single person is convicted.
I want to know what crime Simon Pegg did.
I want to know what crime Simon Pegg did as well. Because they all kind of admit to it, don't they? But it's the fact that we do actually get kind of an origin story for Grace. And I was thinking, watching the film, she's getting inducted, you know, Kittredge welcomes her on board at the end, you know, she takes the oath or whatever it is, the what's it called? The
question.
The question. So yeah, I can absolutely see that. Whether Tom Cruise goes out in a blaze of glory in the same kind of style as No Time to Die, or whether he ends up just kind of, yeah, I'm just going to put it out there, if he does go out in a blaze of glory, or if, he does end up being the head of the IMF, I could easily see this series continuing with kind of the core team, with Grace possibly leading the helm, or someone else coming in. Who knows, Could be anyone.
Jeremy Renner, sorry. But it's an interesting question because I just didn't think they'd do that, and that kind of segues, I guess, with the team. And we'll save Ilsa for last, but of course, Benji and Luther returning.
Yeah.
Listen, Ving Rhames is in every Mission Impossible film. He's such a wonderful part of. He's almost like this point with Q, Desmond Llewellyn's Q, where it's like he's part of the furniture. You find a way, and you put him in. And I love the fact that this one is like, you know what? I'm gonna have to go deep. I'm gonna have to go off the grids. It's like, okay, we'll see you in part 2. See you later. And I kind of love that. And Benji, I mean, Simon Pegg, it's amazing with him. Obviously, with us, right? The first thing we all probably saw him in was probably Shaun of the Dead / Hot Fuzz. Not to assume that you saw them first, but Britain as a country, maybe that's a better term.
I had watched a bit of Spaced, but apart from that,
and like the British comedian, going to Hollywood, and you kind of forget that, a lot of people pinpoint Star Trek as his big one, but I know it's very small on Mission Impossible 3, but the career he's had in the States, and he's such a welcome part of this franchise. And whenever you see him and Rebecca Ferguson do all the junkets together this year, and they were great. Whenever he's sort of joking, laughing with Tom Cruise, it's almost part of the family with this series, and that's how it's felt like since Macquarie's come on board. And I'm talking that with Ghost Protocol, with him doing rewrites on set for that film. It's really interesting that, I sort of joked before that we're going to lose Benji or Ilsa in this film. I can sense it to part 1. And there was a moment, the airport scene, where I thought, oh my God, when it says "you are done," I love that. The tension on the first viewing for that to be like, I want to say 20 minutes into a film, but that's maybe 20 minutes past the credits at this point in time. It's got a longer pre-title sequence than No Time to Die, 28 minutes apparently. So that's one record gone. But the whole cog, the whole speech, what do you fear the most? What are these riddles? I was loving all of that. And I love the fact that, again, having Benji like as the potential threat, it's earned. After all these films, I'm still on board with him. I love seeing him. And he didn't have as much to do as some of the other films, but I think we got enough because of the opening to then put the focus elsewhere, again, on developing Grace.
I feel like where they kind of leave part 1, he's probably going to have a bigger part to play in part 2.
Yeah.
And I know that, he has a decent kind of role in this film. He's at the start and they kind of abandon the mission, and then they come back together and he kind of pulls everyone together in the end. And, he's there at the kind of finale, but not on the train. He's just kind of the man in the car with the laptop, making sure that things run smoothly. But the fact that the film ends with kind of him picking up, Ethan, and them driving off, it's just them two together. There's no one else there who can help them out on the mission. So it will just be them two. So I have a feeling that in part 2, at least for the first hour or so, it's just going to be them two. And they're just going to have to try and figure out things on their own, kind of, and I'm okay with that. I'm completely okay with that. As far as Luther's character is concerned, it's once again always nice to see Ving Rhames in all of these films. He is the constant, apart from Tom Cruise, to appear throughout these films. And I guess this is the point where we talk about Ilsa and, her character who dips in and out of the films. Every single film she's in, you think, oh, maybe she dies in this one, maybe she dies in this one, then she actually dies in this one.
I mean, there's been a lot of talk about this, and I've got a 4-letter answer as to why I think she died, which I won't spell out just yet. But one thing I didn't realize until recently was that she was pregnant throughout filming most of Fallout, and they sort of had to switch her role around in Fallout instead of a very compelling arc, actually. But even that added info, and Rebecca Ferguson, again, all over the marketing, were part of the machine for this. And in the trailers, I think people were worried because we, of course, had the shot of her on the bridge of Ezzy Morales and the eye patch with the sniper rifle. This isn't maybe a criticism of the film, but I did not like the fake out in the opening.
No.
And it reeked of a worst case scenario. Are we going to have this actor available for this film? I don't think it's fridging. And I've seen people talk about fridging, which I think is very fair. The reason I don't think is that at all, which is that 4-letter answer I keep talking about, is why is she gone in this film Dune.
Yeah,
Part 2 of Dune shot the exact same time as Part 2 of Dead Reckoning. No one's pointed it out yet. It's so obvious. That's why. Um, that I know that's not to take out the effect from the death that you could write her out, you could do anything else, but
I really
genuinely,
hope it's
she's in
not
like
another
three
fake out.
scenes.
I've seen people
It's not.
talking
I
online and saying it's another fake out. It's not. It can't be a fake out. There's no way. And
and
I
the
think, oh, just it'd be horrific if it was a fake out.
it'd be horrific because I loved the idea of the. I know the song in the soundtrack's called "I Was Hoping It'd Be You." I love how she goes out. That maybe she's had a compelling arc in this film, but again, on that second view, I was thinking, okay, in Rogue Nation, she's undercover for the British intelligence to mop up their mess. She's brought back into the fold in Fallout because it's still the Syndicate to a point. And in this one, it's what can she do? She's already disavowed. She's found a way out. How do you bring her back
the
in?
one thing you've got left is the fact that she's a possibly maybe love interest for Ethan. That's it.
Exactly.
That's
And
the
we get
only
teasers.
thing.
We get the whole first time in Venice type thing. And it's very curious for me about what they're doing, how they're trying to do it. And I just thought it was really interesting, the approach to this one. But kind of in line with that, the character herself, I'd say, yeah, she's how much doing this film. But at least they get the great line that follows through of it. It's like, you're alive because of her. And I also understand that, can you really juggle having Grace, Ilsa, Benji, and Luther and the villains? There's so much going on. And for the final act as well, the train sequence, how do you fit Ilsa in there?
Yeah.
Because you can't fit Ving Rhames in, which is why Luther's gone. Benji's, serving his purpose. He disappears once, Tom Cruise does the cliff jump. It's a really tricky final act to bounce characters. And the more I've thought about it, again, I'm lucky, I saw this one 12 days ago, so I've had more time than just think about it. But I actually think they did the right thing in killing her off. I just think that maybe, and again, we won't know this, it's just me speculating. Was she around much for filming? Was there much they could do? Because it does feel like the opening fake out felt like it could have been it.
I mean, she's in a desert scene. She's then in a truck taking them out of, Rome, and then it's Venice, and that's it. Realistically, she's not actually in the film that much. And I'd liken her to, I'm not sure if have you watched Luther?
The early seasons.
So I'd liken her character to Alice, who is in the early seasons. Alice is like an anti-hero character in the series. She's not always on the side of the good. She's not always on the side of the bad, but she does kind of get along with Luther and kind of, works with him. And I'd say that Ilsa's character, because she is a double agent in the first film that she's introduced into, she's working with Ethan, but also kind of against Ethan. And that's happened in pretty much every single film. I guess this is the one film where you could say that she doesn't do that, but she's still, kind of in it for herself. And, the entire world's after her, and Ethan goes after her in the end and, manages to kind of send her off on her own, but, takes the key piece in the end. But they killed off Alice in Luther. And that drove Luther's character more motivated to kind of complete his job and focus on his work. And that helped his character across the later series. I feel like this is going to motivate Ethan as a character to, actually get the mission done. And like you said before, you've got Grace in there as well now, who could very easily be a love interest attached onto the top if you wanted to. I mean, the chemistry's been set there. There's been no kind of show of any romance between the two of them. But at the same time, there's potential there for it. So, you can't have two romantic things in the fray in an action film. That's just too over the top. So you've got to kind of kill off one of them. They give that, ultimatum in the end. And it just makes sense that Ilsa's, time has come because she's been riding death all the way throughout this entire franchise. So for her to come up against, Gabriel, Gabriel killing another person that Tom Cruise, loves or is pining after, it kind of completes her circle and, it's history repeating itself. So it'd be fascinating to see whether there's another similar scenario in part 3 where Grace is kind of held to knife point or, almost killed by Gabriel, and whether the third time lucky for Ethan to actually save the day in the end. But it sets up that kind of, history repeating itself, and actually gives Gabriel a massive +1 for the villain, because he's not just
Yeah.
a villain who's killed someone from Tom Cruise's past. He's a villain who's actively killing Tom Cruise's team in front of him. I really like the parallels as well between, the scenes in Venice and the scenes in the first film where Tom Cruise's team's, getting, kind of murdered in the streets, and he's kind of running through the narrow alleyways and stuff like that. I really enjoyed that.
The mission gone wrong is like a great thing that I don't think
Exactly.
they've done too much. I know with Ghost Protocol, everything goes wrong every time, and it's
Yeah.
one of the reasons it's so good. But exactly, and it's all good points with it. And as well, sometimes I like to put it in wrestling terms, and some people might say it's fridging. I don't think this is like in wrestling terms. I know you hate wrestling, but they call it like putting them over, where you'd have like a seasoned veteran who would lose clean to like an up and coming person, right? To put it on their CV, like, this is the one with the future. Let's like pass the baton on. This is like the villain terms, right? Like, okay, you've loved this character for 3 films, great. We're gonna have a street fight in Venice, and I'm gonna kill her, and it helps with developing as I guess as much as you can with Izzy Morales. We'll talk about that in a bit. But what a way for her to go out. The samurai sword, the soundtrack coming in, fighting over the bridge, and the way in which she dies is horrific because he slits like her legs first. So when she does go for the usual tricks, she can't do them. And I just thought I loved the fight. And one thing credit to Chris McQuarrie in this. His other 2 Mission Impossibles, there's not really been much like, I know everyone talk about the bathroom scene, which is amazing, but there's not been too much actual sort of fist-to-fist combat, if that makes sense. But in this film, there's so much of it. And I actually think there's so much talks on the stunts. Certainly in part 1, who knows about part 2. There's great smaller moments, which obviously aren't going to be as marketable because you can't jump around saying, "Oh my god, the shrinking street fight." Like, no one's going to talk about that. It's not Mombasa from Inception. No one talks about when Leonardo DiCaprio ran too far down the tunnel. But spoke about some of the team. We just got a couple more of the good guys. Then we're going to talk villains because we've got to talk about Kittredge, played by Henry Czerny, returning to the franchise after 27 years.
Fantastic.
All over the trailers. Has an incredible voice. Not just the return of Kittredge, but the insane Dutch angles to accompany him was so well earned. I don't know if earned the right word, but I absolutely loved having him back. And I love the fact that you've got this amazing, you've got Indira Varma. You've got, not Nick Hoffman, that'll be in part 2. You've got Indira Varma. You've got Warlock from Top Gun Maverick. You've got Mark Gatiss. You've got Carey Hughes. You've got, Rob Delaney. And it's like big reveals. Kittredge emerges from the sofa. Most people that haven't seen the first one don't know who that is. They don't know what that means to have that character pop up there. But I just thought it's a really great way. And actually, I've listened to a few interviews from McQuarrie and Tom Cruise. And apparently Tom Cruise, from day one, was desperate to bring Kittredge back into this film.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you knew, but Nicholas Hoult was originally the villain for this film. And he had to drop out. And one of the, I think, ideas around it was that they wanted to go further into the past of Ethan Hunt so that Kittredge being back for this one was on board. And Henry Czerny said in an interview that actually that spoke to him. This is Light the Fuse. If anyone doesn't listen to Light the Fuse podcast, they're now officially the official Mission Impossible podcast, which is amazing. Henry Czerny said he had a call from McQuarrie years ago, didn't get into whichever film that one was going to be. Then he got it for Dead Reckoning, and he was on board. But just a really nice moment. I love the fact he's head of the IMF. He doesn't like Tom Cruise still. And there's this big game of politics happening where he wants the keys for the Americans, but does he want it for the Americans, or does he deep down want it for Tom Cruise to do the right thing? You got Carey Hughes, who's doing his head of the I'm going to launch a dastardly new government scheme. I love the fact there's politics in play, and I think that this film earned it, and we'll talk about the characters that I think make that possible. But are you excited to see him back?
Oh, absolutely. He was one of my favorite characters in the first Mission Impossible, and to have him back, even for the trailer, his line in the trailer, which he delivered in the film, phenomenal. Like that speech that he kind of talks to, Ethan about, like this mission is going to cost you dearly. Like it's so well delivered, and a fantastic character to bring back. The fact that along with the Dutch angles, the slight tilts to the camera, we don't quite know which way he tilts as a character. He is just on edge always. You're not sure which way he's going to swing. Is he a hero? Is he actually trying to do it for the the sake of the government, or is he going for a power grab himself? it's fascinating. It's really fascinating, and it's a character that I want to see more of in part two. I want to see more of if they're going to continue the franchise in the future. He's a fantastic actor, and he deserves more screen time, more lines, a bigger role, whatever. Just throw everything at him because I loved him as a character.
Yeah, and I think we're going to get a lot more from him. And I know that I forgot the actor's name, but in the first Mission Impossible, the poor guy who gets the shits when they steal the knock list, he was in the trailer. He's going to be in part two. He was meant to be in part one, but that didn't go through. But I also want to talk about Greg Tarzan Davis and Shea Wiggum.
Yeah.
Both. I mean, I thought Shea Wiggum was the villain for this film. In the trailer, when it's Tom Cruise in the mask, I thought that was Shea Wiggum from the get-go. It looks like him, had the hair. It's not. The mask reveal was bloody amazing in that scene. What were your thoughts on the sort of buddy cop thing? Because a lot of comedy came from these two, and I absolutely loved it.
Well, it's once again, which way do they actually lean? What is their end game here? Like, it's quite interesting to have just kind of two regular people working for, the IMF, trying to track down Ethan and actually following them for a bit, because a lot of the time, people who chase after Ethan are either henchmen, villains, or just nameless people. To have people on kind of the good side of things, or at least meant to be the good side of things, chasing after Ethan, makes it really, really interesting. Like, it's a fascinating dynamic that's set up, and yeah, it's a good kind of buddy cop comedy kind of vibe that they give off. I'm wondering whether they kind of took a little bit of inspiration from Bullet Train, with was it Tangerine and is it Lemon?
Lemon and Tangerine, is
Lemon
it?
and Tangerine, yeah. Because I got those kind of vibes from it. Like, they play off each other well. They've clearly, worked with each other for some time, but they also have differing views on the situation, how they should handle it. Is it right to, actually help out Tom Cruise in this scenario, but the next scenario, we're actually going to go and try and kind of capture him. And, the standoff in Rome where they almost shoot him, but then they decide, actually, no, we really shouldn't in this situation. He's in the right here. We'll catch up to him later. Kind of thing. It does kind of set in that seed of doubt, and I'm sure we'll see more of them from part two as they kind of continue their pursuit. Maybe they actually join Ethan and they form part of the team for the second film. I'm guessing that's why you're nodding, because you think that's what's going to happen.
I mentioned about the whole Hayley Atwell, could this be her future role, right?
Yeah.
I find it very interesting that Warlock is the only. Well, aside from Warlock, who's in that opening bit, if anyone's known Warlock from Top Gun, it's not John Voight number 2, John Hamm's number 2. Greg Tarzan Davis is the only Top Gun Maverick carryover, right? And I'm not saying that means he's the chosen one or anything like that, but in this film, he's obviously got the moral compass, and at the end, he goes, "This is too much power for one man to have." Part of my brain was ticking there, and is he? I mean, this is the Marvelization of cinema, which I hate. Right, that we're talking futures, we're talking sequels, spin-offs. We're not talking about the present. But part of me just did wonder: is there a plan for Mission Impossible post Dead Reckoning Part 2? And I think there is. I'm not saying it's a plan that's formed, but I think Tom Cruise is looking at the future of what the series could be and people he wants on board. And I felt like Shea Wiggum and Greg Tarzan Davis, as much as comic relief as they were, there's something, as the film got more and more in that they were, it's cat and mouse to begin with. Then it's them on the train with him. It's them taking orders, saving him. He saves them. I love the relationship they have, but I've just got to say, every time Shea Wiggum pops up in a film, and I feel bad because I think Boardwalk Empire's, I don't know if he was a lead in that, or that's one of the main things he's been in, and I've not seen it. We can blame Sky for adding in adverts to the skippable adverts packages, which we now have to sit through. He is amazing in everything I've seen, and he just always has a presence that I like. And I think he's a traditional character actor that we don't get enough of him in these films. And the one thing I'm going to point out, he has one, and every time I will bring this up, I can. He has one of the greatest deaths in cinema history in Kong Skull Island. And if no one can remember him in that film, he's the guy where they do the 2-minute self-sacrifice build-up with the grenade in his hands to be eaten, to get tail whipped into the buildings, well, not buildings, the walls like a mile away. They do the amazing zoom in, one of the funniest fake outs ever. But I just love seeing Shea Wiggum and stuff. And when he was cast in this, and again, the trailer, I was just convinced he was the villain. And I'm so glad he's not. He was so funny. When he's pulling the faces. And I think what this film does really well with the comedy, it pokes fun at the IMF and the other films. And it's the whole just grabbing people's face in the airport was just so funny. And the audience reacted to those every time as well. even later on when it's Kittredge, he just starts grabbing his face just to make sure. I just thought
Yeah.
the comedy side of it, and it's a very intense film. It's not dark by tone, but there's a lot of exposition. It is heavy, and you need the balance as a comedy sometimes. And the Mission Impossible franchise have always had that, and I'm glad these two found a way. I know I'm probably going on too much because we've got to talk the villains.
No, exactly. Yeah. I was going to say, moving on to the main villains of the film, I want to talk about the Entity first.
Yes.
And I want to talk about, as far as the Entity is concerned, a clever decision that they've made with this film. Now, this film, kind of the main villain is the Entity. It's on all social media, it's on all computers, it can hack into any system, which means that, going forwards, they can't use technology. They have to go back to old school spy techniques. And that is fantastic. That is a great setup for the film. It's one of those kind of Cold War things, where they have to go back to the World War II, equipment to work because everything that's being kind of built can be compromised. So it's a brilliant setup that kind of allows some of the stunts to take place in the film, allows for them to be feasible. And it also allows for the next film to really focus down quite heavily on practical work and spy work and move away from, anything that may be computer based or computer generated. It's almost like it's a commentary on cinema itself. So I want to give a +1 for that kind of idea in the first place, to take the technology out of the film by making technology the villain of the film and having us focus back in on, the old school spy work, the old school kind of ways of, Ethan Hunt getting things done. So he doesn't have to rely on, his tech savvy team. He has to rely on his own wits to be able to kind of get around and do things. The Entity is a fantastic villain. I don't know whether it'll be remembered as much as some of the previous villains, in recent times. It's really, really difficult because Mission Impossible doesn't have the best of villains across the entire franchise, but the ones who are good do stand out. It's very difficult to pin it because it doesn't have a voice. It doesn't really have, a say in anything.
It's like the Eye of Mordor. It's the AI of Mordor.
It has a messenger. And as far as the message is concerned, Isaiah Morales plays it amazingly, like really fascinating. I've not seen him in anything before, so it was really kind of fascinating to see him cast and go, oh, what's he been in? And I kind of didn't really recognize anything. So to have him, come forth and actually put up a really good performance, quite a threatening one where you can see that he's scared of what he's being threatened with, but at the same time, he's willing to inflict that kind of fear onto other people, and that's what drives him. Is fantastic. I really want to delve into kind of what his character actually is a lot deeper in part 2, which I'm just going to go ahead and say we are 100% going to do that because, but something down to kind of, the chilled, calm persona, like everything goes to plan. And then suddenly at the end of the film, he's just shouting out, Ethan, he loses it. And that's kind of, that's a crack in the character that I've been waiting to see. And suddenly it's there. So, really good kind of pairing of these two villains. I guess we'll talk about, Paris and I guess Alana and Zolo a little bit further on. But yeah, I want to hear your thoughts on Gabriel and,
what you said there's amazing actually, the AI stuff that is making me go back, and not enough spy films have done that. And then the server room, they're talking out there, we've got to get it all analog, blah, blah, blah. And it's a great way to take away some of the, in other Mission Impossible films, right? The masks became too much. Okay, let's have a damaged mask. We kind of get that again today. But the concept of the Entity, I really enjoy. And I like the fact, kind of was at the start, it's scared of Ethan Hunt. That its adversary is, and it's scared of Ethan because he wants to destroy it. He isn't trying to control it. And that thing knows the only way it can be beaten is by Ethan. And even that ideology that how does this, figment, this machine, retaliate to its biggest threat, it becomes what it's said to be Ethan Hunt's biggest threat, which is Gabriel. Now, I don't know my Christianity and religious histories events, but I'm pretty sure, was there an angel called Gabriel?
He is the Archangel Gabriel. So
yeah,
he is the right hand of God or left hand of God.
And what does Tom Cruise say in this film? I'm going to kill you and your God. So there's a lot of, and the key, of course, is a cross within itself.
It's the crucifix key,
yeah. There's a lot of religious, stuff in there that people spoke about, which, I'd be having to go back to school to do half that, if I'm being honest.
Well, they go to Rome, the Vatican's. There's so many kind of different things that you compare to religion and everything like that.
But I love Leslie Malice in this. Now, as soon as I watched the film, I went straight onto his IMDb, as a lot of people do. And there's a few films I recognise, but I'll be blunt and say I maybe don't remember him in them. whether he had smaller roles. But I like the fact, and the more I read that it could have been Nicholas Hoult. I love Nicholas Hoult. I know he was up for Superman recently, which he didn't get. But this film, oh, if it was a younger actor doing the whole AI spiel, doing the talk, no, it would never work. I'm so glad that they went for an actor who is maybe. I don't want to disrespect his career and say,
I
look,
want to know. I'm going to go ahead and say it. He's not a well-known actor. He's a known TV actor. He's award-winning, sure, but as far as Hollywood is concerned, he is not a well-known actor.
yeah.
So this could be seen as his breakout role in this film, because I'm sure after this he's going to get so many different roles thrown his way.
To counterbalance it, I think maybe to go a bit deeper, the Bond films have got so attached to the idea of the contextual Oscar winner as the villain. You know, you had not Freddie Mercury, you had Rami Malek in No Time to Die, you had Christoph Waltz coming in before, Javier Bardem.
Yeah,
they were going in so much. Sometimes, and I'm not saying caster again, not to discredit anyone, but it's appropriate casting. And Ezzy Ramos has this amazing presence where he looks phenomenal in that white suit, and his voice is really, you know, I say like Kittredge has an amazing voice. Like I could listen to Kittredge like narrate anything. I kind of had that with Ezzy Ramos that every time he's like telling a story, I'm just whimsically listening, like, please tell me more. Like I want to know what the story is.
Yeah.
And I really liked him in this, that he has this like unknown intensity. And I'm curious to seek out a few other things obviously that he's done now. But as you said, things will start coming his way. And to his credit as well, let's talk physical performance as well. He's on the train fighting with Tom Cruise. And this is what I love reading with the Mission Impossible films, is that it's not just Tom Cruise doing these insane stunts. Of course, he does the insane stunts, but apparently the actors are really up for it when they're on these sets. And Ezra Manos has spoken about like working with Tom Cruise. They're on the trains together. And you just got to think, like, what a great... And the fight itself is amazing they have. And as you said, we're going to get so much more from him in part 2. He's been left alive for that very reason. There's a story to tell. There's a backstory to learn. I'm very intrigued. And I'm excited to see what is going to sort of follow that. And, you know, with the entity as well, I don't mind. I'm more than happy with the AI. And I know it's a bit, it can predict tomorrow how you defeat, you know, the future type thing. But there's enough there for me that I felt like was appropriate to this. But I want to talk about someone who I think steals this film. Paris, played by Pom Klementieff, is incredible in this film. Her performance is almost entirely physical. And I know a lot of people will say this in The Guardian films. Okay, she's been in some other stuff. I think she popped up in Bullet Train for like a minute, really randomly last year. But her in this film is amazing. I absolutely loved her. I love the costume designs. Also, the women in the suits they're wearing in this. I know Hayley Atwell went viral talking about Bowie because it looks like she's in like a Bowie costume. Pom Klementieff in this is just unbelievable. In the black suit, absolutely love it. And I love how Chris McCrory's approach with it from the interviews I've been looking at with them. It's kind of for her to take her own approach to the character, that you're playing this character, you know, not do what you want to do, but there's creative freedom for the performers. And I loved her in this, whether it's the street fight, not the street fight, you know, like the metal stuff, the train having her moment at the end, the redemption. She has a very fluid approach, and I can't quite put my hand on it, but I just loved every time, like when she's in the 4x4 car, crushing the steps, just ramming everything. I thought she's amazing. And I don't want to call it a breakout role because that's really disrespectful. I know she's been in like stuff like Marvel, but what a summer to do Guardians 3 in this. I just, and is she going to return in the second one?
I guess so.
I'm guessing she's dead, but could she?
No,
if they're going to do a fake out,
no, they actually said that she had a pulse.
There we go. Because I'm curious now. I'm very curious what they do with her, because there's a lot to see that. I don't know. Am I overhyping her? I just thought she's incredible.
I would say you are overhyping her. I'll be perfectly honest. I was expecting more from her character. I was wanting more. It's a good physical role. And it's sometimes fun to have, you know, a silent villain or a villain that doesn't really speak too much and is just like a henchwoman or a henchman. But, you know, I kind of was expecting her to actually have more lines and, you know, actually have a bit of a personality instead of just being a psycho and then just kind of blurting out, oh, I was going to betray him in the end. She didn't really have much to do in that sense, and I wasn't too happy with that. I would say I was expecting a lot more from her character, and actually I was slightly disappointed with her character because it was a purely physical kind of, what is her motivation? She's batshit insane. There's no motivation as to why she's with,
She's a henchwoman, though, and that's
but
what I've sort of stuck
why?
with.
It's like, why was she picked? But it's like, at least
why
you
does
can see
Blofeld
kind
have
of,
hench people?
yeah, but
It's a
you can
hench
see kind
woman,
of
I
like
guess.
brought on board and everything like that. But Oddjob doesn't speak. That's his whole thing. He does not say a word
And he throws a
throughout
hat.
the entire film, and he throws a hat. She can speak, but doesn't speak, and that's why I'm a bit like, well, if
Does
she
she
was
need to speak,
completely,
though?
if she was
Because she
completely
speaks when
mute,
she
I would
needs to.
understand it.
She speaks when
If
she needs to speak.
I know, but if she was completely mute, I would completely understand it, and I'd be like, okay, that's fine. I like this character, but the fact that she's really quiet is like, eh. Like I was expecting a little bit more from it. I was expecting her to actually have some lines of dialogue and actually kind of flesh out her character a little bit more than I'm crazy. Look at me. I'm going to blow up stuff. I'm just going to chase after Ethan. It felt very underdeveloped as a character for someone who is a good actress who we've seen act really, really well before. So unless there's going to be more revealed in part 2, which hasn't really been hinted yet. I mean, she's been taken back in alive. I don't know if she's going to be a source of like interrogation or whether she's actually going to be used in the second film at all on kind of her revenge of trying to go after Gabriel. But I was expecting more from her. I really was expecting more. Even some kind of dialogue with any of the other characters, even a small scene with her talking to Gabriel, something like that. But we didn't get it in the end. It's just, it's one-way dialogue with Gabriel kind of talking to everyone else, and she's just kind of sat in the background, not really doing much. So I'm on the other end of the spectrum to you on that one. But it'd be interesting. Put down in the comments which kind of side of the debate are you on? Do you think Palm Clementive's role was, like really fantastically done, or do you think that she could have done more in her role? That'd be an interesting debate actually to see how people fall on that.
That's fair. And to round out characters, we've got to talk the return of Alana, I guess, and Zola. You have to put them in the brackets. Played by Vanessa Kirby, Frederick Schmidt. I was really, and I'll take this, and this is one of the big surprises of this film for me, and I think it's in the spoiler-free review. I was very surprised when they announced Vanessa Kirby was coming back because she didn't have too much to do in Fallout, and I enjoyed her in Fallout. Of course, she played Margaret in the early seasons of The Crown. She's going to be in Napoleon with what's his name? God, I forgot the name of the person who played Joker. That's embarrassing. Anyway, director.
Oh God, I blanked out as well now.
Joaquin Phoenix.
Joaquin Phoenix, yeah.
And when they said she'd come back, I was like, okay, cool. She was like one shot in the trailer, and I was like, yeah, she's probably not going to be in it much. The surprise of the film is that Vanessa Kirby is in this a lot, and I mean this in like a great way. And now I know that Paul Klein on our first review alluded to, Vanessa Kirby is the daughter of Max. I was like, what? And she is. And then this film, they really did cement it. And apparently, I read an interview with Tom Cruise where he said they had a whole idea of her backstory in Fallout, which they didn't run with because it didn't work, which was clearly going to be about her mother being from the first film. And bringing her back in this, they were able to dive into it a bit more. Of course, they did it in a much smarter way with Kittredge, knowing her when she was a girl, that she was being used by the American government. She picked their side. I just had no idea Vanessa Kirby was going to have a significant role. I thought she was amazing in this. I love what's going around at the moment, where Vanessa Kirby has blue eyes, and when Hayley Atwell puts the mask on, she's in brown contact lenses for the rest of it while she's masked up. No one notices it, which I thought was a great little detail as well. I just thought she's great. And I love these kind of things. And this isn't just Mission Impossible, they're wearing a mask. I think that you might have seen this years ago because we're similar ages. Do you remember when Deathly Hallows Part 2 came out?
It was immediately what I was thinking of.
It was like a long-winded meme where it's like, this is Emma Watson playing Hermione Granger, playing blah, 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 playing blah, blah, blah. And it was this really long-winded thing. And I was like, that's Hayley Atwell, Vanessa Kirby in this, but again, her physical and I don't know what you'd call like a dialect performance, but when it is the Hayley Atwell in the mask, Vanessa Kirby's performance is 180 different, and I absolutely loved it. And again, I was just so surprised that she'd actually have stuff to do, that she had a character arc, that she's the biggest loser of the lot because every government relies on her for handouts, and she's got to pick one and upset the others. they built that stuff up so well, and that's kind of what I was saying earlier about Ilsa. You can't add Ilsa into this equation because Vanessa Kirby's taking on this role for the final act of we need this person to be here for these reasons, and I just thought it felt very, very espionage-esque. And again, we've not had that since the early Mission Impossible films, and it wasn't just a big mask reveal; it was actually character points in motion for the story, and I really enjoyed where they went with it. Again, I know Zola doesn't have much to do. You get a bit of comic relief whenever he gets knocked out and stuff like that. But what were your thoughts on them bringing her back and it to actually be far more significant?
I mean, I liked her character in the previous film, so bringing her back in for this film is really cool. And the fact that she is kind of she's like the arms dealer, kind of like of this entire universe. She's been brought in, and she's kind of being used by every single government, but she's happy to kind of work with some, kind of work against the others. But in this film, she's given a very, very difficult choice. You're pretty much picking against every single government if you pick for one different government, or you go up, pretty much give all the power to the entity itself and take all the risk out of it. And you see her character frightened in that scenario. And like you said as well, an actor playing a version of themselves that's slightly different is always fantastic to see on screen. Mission Impossible franchise has done a very good job with that in general, of people playing their own character but in a mask of someone else playing their character and getting the mannerisms and characteristics down and everything like that. I noticed the blue eyes, brown eyes thing. I did think, though, I was really hoping that someone would pick up on it, like someone like Kidridge kind of going, you like something like, I remember you having blue eyes, like kind of like you had blue eyes when you were a child, and kind of catching her out on it. But that's okay, that's fine. But no, I really enjoyed the performance. I think it was definitely needed in the film. Provided a little bit of comic relief from the train sequence, and we have that kind of attachment to the previous film and its continuation, so it isn't a complete zero kind of move on from the previous film. It's just
Yeah, and that's it. And I think that's what the Mission Impossible films have sort of done well as time's gone by, as they are starting to bring it together as a series that, again, not Marvel, you don't have to watch ABC to understand EFG, but it does help if you've got this additional knowledge, and it rewards you, the viewer, which is the way series always should be. But moving from characters, got a really good discussion on that. I want to talk the score before we get to the big stunts.
Yeah.
Lord Balfe returning. Unbelievable soundtrack. The first viewing, didn't notice it as much.
Oh, I did.
The second viewing, it just hit so differently. Of course, it's now out. I've been listening to it since Wednesday when it dropped. I absolutely love him as a composer. I know some people will cry saying, "Oh, it's a bit like Hans Zimmer." Well, yeah, he learned from Hans Zimmer. Like, he worked on The Dark Knight. We spoke about it in the Fallout video. There's a reason he's come back, the second composer after Michael Giacchino, to return to Mission Impossible film. I loved the score for this one. And the main thing I keep going to, there's two moments. There's the marching drums, which are now in the Mission Impossible theme, which apparently was an idea by Tom Cruise because the coronation last year. What was last year? 70th anniversary of the Queen.
Yeah.
What was that called?
The Jubilee.
Jubilee, that's it, sorry. Apparently that was one of the reasons that led to that the marching drum was something they wanted to try, which worked. But I keep going back and I keep dramatically pulling the car up on the drive when it's called it. I Was Hoping It Would Be You. It's the song in which Rebecca Ferguson goes out. Unbelievable score. I don't have much more to say. I've got the vinyl on pre-order to join the pack. It came out. Pre-orders went up on Wednesday. Just need Rogue Nation. I need them to release Rogue Nation, obviously part 2 next year. Then I'll have the whole set.
You need to find Mission Impossible 2.
Yeah, I can find it all right. It's the price I don't like, and it's the worst one, which makes it worse. Yeah, score. I don't have too much more saying it, but I'll kind of go back to what you said at the beginning, right? When Tom Cruise did the jump and everyone went silent, so glad it was silent and it wasn't soundtrack. And sometimes films, they need that. They just need to let the audience see the moment, witness the moment. Because what that one moment has as well, when the parachute launches, it's like this horrendous like whip sound. And the film's better for it, but I know that's not a soundtrack.
It reminds me of the cliff jump in The Spy Who Loved Me. The kind of, silence during the jump, the build up, the silence, and then the music comes back in, and it just, it works so well. But it's a good sign of a good composer if they know how to use silence well, if they know when and where to kind of cut the music and where the music would work best, and what scenes were good with music and what scenes don't. And he's done a fantastic job of the score again. It's just an improvement on the previous film, and I don't really know what else to say. It was noticeable in the first viewing, and I was really listening into the music and kind of, really getting myself involved in it. And I'm excited to see how it develops further in part two, especially with kind of score progressions and how they work and everything like that. Part two usually combines more elements, or I'm expecting more elements combined from the previous films, expecting more elements combined, from the last film, and just kind of the development, the leitmotif being carried over and just built and built and built and built.
No, absolutely. And kind of topping off that, before we get to, I guess, favorite scenes, we don't have as much behind the scenes detail as we always do, but we've got the big stunts, and we've sort of, I say, narrowed it down to 3. This hasn't got as much as, say, maybe Fallout or Rogue Nation, but it has definitively. It's got the car chase in Rome. I know you haven't seen it. The second Hollywood blockbuster of 2023 to have the exact same car chase through Rome. Mission Impossible X. Well, not Mission Impossible X. Sorry, Fast X.
Furious X.
They don't just do that. They also have an Indiana Jones Raiders bomb they're chasing down to stop it going to the Vatican. Very different car chases. I liked this sequence. I don't think I like this as much as others have. It's a very competent sequence still. I'm not taking anything away from it.
It's well shot, but damn, it's too long.
My favorite part of it is off screen, which is when you see the slow-mo after the crash Hayley Atwell has, and you just see the motorbike just launch at the people. Both screenings has had loud laughter at that. And part of me is like, oh, was he doing the motorbike jousting from Mission Impossible 2 again? We'll never see.
Literally.
I liked the sequence.
It just feels like it went on for too long, and there were key points in the sequence which were needed, and there's some points where it was just like they've shot this action sequence, they filmed it, and they've decided not to cut it. They've just decided to keep going.
It's so much fun, it keeps going, and I don't mind it. And again, it's a 2 hour 45 runtime, and I'll be honest, we haven't mentioned the runtime. I didn't feel the 2 hours 45 not once. No. I thought about checking my phone. It blew by, and the fact someone said the opening is 28 minutes. That doesn't feel like a 28-minute opening sequence. That's the submarine and the exposition talk after. But the Rome's very impressive. Again, Tom Cruise's handcuffed to Hayley Atwell, but we kind of know they would. I mean, again, it's not arrogant saying, "Well, we know it's going to be all right." It was a good set piece, but I think that the series had other better ones. But I know they shot it in lockdown, that Rome was empty, which meant they could, I guess, have complete free for all with what they wanted to do in the city at that point.
This is the only time that Rome's going to be locked down. Let's just use all of it.
Exactly. And apparently, if you look at the establishing shots of Rome, apparently there's no cars because it was drone shots during the lockdown.
Wow.
So there was nothing there. And I guess I know that the second stunt is more so part of a final act, and the final act is almost a stunt within itself. But the cliff jump, it's the poster. It's today's poster.
It's the best stunt they've ever done for Mission Impossible, just plain and simple.
Yeah, and this is what I was curious about. It was so over-marketed, and that's not a criticism of calling it over-marketed. It's the right thing to do, like the Burj Khalifa in the fourth film. How do you build up to that in this? And I love the fact that, and I guess the audience is in it, where once he gets to the motorbike, he's in the costume. He said, "Okay, I've seen this 100 times. How are you going to do this in the film? How are you going to make it different to what was in?" The build-up of him missing the train to begin with, that they have the perfect plan that doesn't work because it never does, and it's just him finding the other spots to jump off. The comic relief of Benji was needed, but nothing can prepare you for, even though again you've seen the behind the scenes, it can't prepare you for actually watching it within the context of the film.
Can't.
Knowing he's got to land on a moving train, a train that it's at full speed, and he has to land it. I've got the faintest criticism in the world, which is that it cuts. I know we're not going to obviously see the landing.
I completely agree with you, and him landing inside the plane took me out of the experience, but watching the cliff jump definitely put me in there in the first place. Yeah,
exactly. And I can live with it because the comic moment works of him twatting the guy through. That's very funny. And then being pulled back against the wall to knock the one out. But the context of needing it, again, the stakes were there, the tension was there, the story there, he needed to make the jump, and it worked for that reason. It will be spoken about for years to come. And someone did a tweet earlier, and it was someone put, ignore your box office discussions. They don't care when we get to see things like this on the big screen. It did make me think that, we know there's more to cinema than numbers. Box office is a massive part of it. It's what makes an industry function. But you're right. No matter how many tens and hundreds of millions, and I'm not going to slag off Indiana Jones too much, but it does make you think that came out 2 weeks before. And I know that Harrison Ford isn't going to do stunts in his 80s.
Yeah.
But it's like that awful definition, like, what is cinema? This is Tom Cruise throwing himself off a cliff, having a parachute open to land on a moving train. Yes, he's insane. It's this crazy stunt, but we don't get that anymore. And it's why you go to the cinema, because people want to watch this. They want to see what's drawing you to the cinema to watch this film over anything else.
Yeah.
Modern audiences, the audiences need to be told, why do you have to go to the cinema now? That's the big question the industry faces, and not enough people have clocked on that is the most easiest question in the world. You create a cinematic experience that you can't replicate anywhere else. We have the best sound systems in the world. I've got a pretty decent one I've invested in. I've got a very decent setup. It is not going to look like that when I watch it, because I'm not watching it on IMAX. It's not the biggest screen having that cliff, and you just got to take hats off to the absolute insanity. And for them to arguably top it like 20 minutes later is ridiculous in the same film.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And like you said before, it's not over-marketed, but it was the best advertising this film could have ever had, just showing that cliff jump. And I want to just give credit here for the train sequence itself, because they also put a second, here's how we did the stunts thing, and that part of it was about the Rome car chase, and part of it was about the train sequence, because the train sequence was also very similarly done. They actually did a fight on top of a train. They actually kind of filmed it whilst the train was moving. They had to build the train themselves. They had to actually build the train itself, and to have all of that included in there is brilliant. But one thing I want to give massive credit to, we finally had a film where the 2-minute 25 bomb timer actually felt like 2 minutes 25. I'm pretty sure it was pretty close to that kind of time. It didn't feel like we cut away for 5 minutes and then the bomb went off. It genuinely felt like the timer was synced up with the film. Now, I don't know if anyone can confirm that or not on rewatch, whether you time it or anything like that, but it's got to be closer than, most films get it. And I'm wondering if that was kind of putting an impending sense of doom in there to actually get it more accurate and go, oh shit, like 2 minutes 25 is not a lot of time concerning what's happening in the film. Like, they really do make it pretty quick and, in that exit and whatever. So yeah, I really want to give credit to that.
And I think as well, I don't know if we did it in the Fallout video. The timer of the nuke, it's off, but only because they do a running parallel of these happen at the same time, so we can't have it match. And I want to assume Top Gun Maverick did the timing runs in the right time with how long it took to do the mission bits.
The mission run, yeah.
Just a couple of comments. Martin, Tom Cruise will probably still be doing something in his 80s. I wouldn't put it past him.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past him.
It was what a great film. It did not disappoint, absolutely. And talking the train, I'm glad you brought the train behind the scenes up. I was going to tell everyone to go watch that on YouTube. That went up really strangely the day of the embargo lifting. I told my dad after we watched it, because I know he'd like that behind the scenes, but if you didn't know about the train going off the cliff, I remember the footage came out during filming. That's an amazing surprise. I'm surprised they let that footage come out early. But just to take into account, and this is where I love this, right? People always talk about train sequences and Bond. Mission Impossible just surpassed all of them this week, because you have the entirety of the final act on a train. You have all the dialogue. You have the story. You've got I'll just call it espionage for the sake of it, right? With all the government stuff happening. The keys, the villain's got his own scheme he's working on. To have all of that, and you're perfectly setting up the final action set piece, which isn't Tom Cruise jumping off a cliff.
Yeah.
This is them surviving, don't know what you call it, whenever the carriages go, but the whole build-up to that moment of the carriages dropping off one by one, which we've seen filming. This is why I love the behind the scenes. They had to build that train. They had to design each compartment for them to be able to shoot on, to do the stunts on, to do the sequences on, and for it to function and work as what type of steam train it's meant to be. I actually had someone I know really randomly that I used to work with. He's really into like steam trains. He's actually messaging me after the film came out because he'd seen I'd done the review for it. He was saying that apparently that from a train, I don't know what you'd call them, train spotting. Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
that weird guy does, doesn't he? That sticks his GoPro on. Apparently, it's all accurate in the sense of that community, which is pretty impressive. But this train is one thing to send the train over the cliff, which looked amazing. Again, shot
Oh, it looked
practically.
just having all the cameras attached to it, and
Yeah,
seeing really, really well shot.
people will think it's CG when it's not.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. And I know that obviously they'll fill in some bits of CG to make it a different environment, but they absolutely know what they want to do with the moment. And just sort of following that up, when it's Tom Cruise and Hayley Atwell escaping the compartments one by one, in the John Wick films, people laugh, right? He always gets punched and gets up.
Yeah.
It felt like in John Wick 4 when he goes down the endless flight of stairs in France. Yeah. It feels like that, but this is Tom Cruise doing batshit insane stuff with Hayley Atwell. And I love the fact that they've set it up perfectly that we get one shot earlier in the film of them running into the kitchen. And then when you're getting the grease spilling everywhere and you're noticing the flames, you're like, oh my fucking God, they've got to get off this carriage.
They show every single carriage that they go through in the film, and they show it in detail. It's the whole kind of show the room and then show the fight through the room concept, or show the house and then kind of show everything, and we're going to go to all of those different places. It's really, really well done in that sense, and it kind of puts that little bit of, foreshadowing in there.
I just think it's one of my favorite final acts of a modern blockbuster because everything serves its purpose, and the fact the cliff jump has to tie into this as well, I just think separates it from a few others, and I absolutely loved it. It's this, again, I don't know what the time is, but the train stuff really, really clicked for me that we've had all this exposition at the beginning for this reason, and it is building up to this, and of course he has the key, that he's got away with it, his plan has worked, the mission has been accomplished to this point in time. And now we've got to find out what is to come, what is he going to have to do next. And I just thought the train stuff was, I don't want to sit here and say it's a $300 million film. Can you see it on screen? Of course, COVID inflates that. But I can look at this and say, I can see that budget. You've seen Flash, not me. That's a $250 million film. It probably doesn't look like it. But this is going to look like a $250 million film. 290, 100%. Sorry. And even Indiana Jones, like, again, not to say it because it's too easy to do it, but the same budget as this, arguably, not at all.
Doesn't warrant it at all.
Train sequence nowhere near as good, and this is where I'm sort of wowed at, and it just makes me think like, what is to come rhetorically? Because I'm not going to say about stuff that's online. If you've seen Tom Cruise's promos about going to the movies, you'll know 2 stunts that are going to happen in the next film at least, and I just cannot wait to see what comes next because. Segueing from the big stunts into kind of overall thoughts, I guess we can talk about what happens next. I genuinely think, you said this a couple of weeks ago as well, like the part 2s, they're always action heavier, they're the big moments. It's not going to be, we've had the story set up for us. Now it's the simple acquisition, get to the submarine. That's it. Do whatever action is going to be, they've hidden it.
We're going to get Tom Cruise running on the seabed underwater trying to get to the submarine, or even worse, we're going to get him in some kind of Ocean Gate vessel trying to get to the submarine.
Maybe James Cameron's involved,
maybe
designing it. And this is it, and I think this is what this film does so well, is that it functions as the part 1, and it functions as its own film as well, that you could watch this in isolation, and it's compelling when it's right. And I just think that the train stuff is like what does that Bell and Salt Bay do? He like sprinkles the stuff on. The train sequence was like that final bit, like you've had the steak, now let them marinate it. But yeah, I know I've jumped ahead, but do you have a favorite scene from the film? And it's putting you on the spot.
For me, my favorite scenes in the film are, of course, the cliff jump, but also, I guess my favorite scene of the film is just Kittredge, his introduction at the start. I really like the tone that was set with the film from very early on. I was expecting that speech to come in a little bit later, midway through is kind of like we kind of understand the mission now, but the fact they came in at the start, it really set the tone for the film, and it was really well done. I guess if I was to pick a third one, it would be kind of Benji and the bomb, just kind of trying to diffuse it, and that whole kind of that scenario of them kind of Ving Rhames focusing on one thing or both things, and Ethan not really being aware of it, and like, yeah, there's a bomb about to go off, we got to try and fix it.
That's fair. Oh god, that's a good one. I mean, it's a cheap putting the final act because I love the whole. It reminds me of from Russia with Love, like just a final act on a train, but like dialed up to 100 with Tom Cruise doing Tom Cruise stuff. But
Mm,
in terms of individual stuff, I love what you mentioned the opening scene with Kittredge as well. Also, the fact that I thought it was a villain. Everyone probably thought it was a big villain moment with the AI thing. It's green gas. There's a villain theme, and then it's Tom Cruise all along. Loved that. Um, oh god, I'll probably go with. It's got to be. I think to me, it's the train off the cliff, and I know that they blew up a real bridge. There
yeah,
was a massive
I've,
aggro
I've
with
read about that. Yeah,
it was I don't know if it was Poland, but it was basically a decommissioned bridge from World War II, sentenced to be destroyed anyway. But the Mission Impossible film wanted to destroy a bridge as well, and it kicked off for a very long time. So there's politics out of my level there. But listen, at the end of the day, um, at least it wasn't just burnt for the sake of it. It got to be put in a Mission Impossible film, which is great in its own right. But it's just fun. Like, even when it comes down to blowing up bridges, they want to do it practically. Like Chris Nolan
yeah,
is very proud.
sure.
Um, but yeah, and kind of segueing off that, final thoughts for me. Is it my film of the year? Question mark. I'm not sure yet. I love it. I can tell you that right now my top two is this and Spider-Verse, and I don't know what's at the top because I think for the sake of this being a part one, if part two delivers, which I have complete faith in the production, this a successful part two will elevate a successful part one.
Mm,
Um, and I absolutely love this. But in respect of my experience, the cinemas, this is the big screen experience. This is why people go to cinema. It's not the boring advert you've seen 100 times. You want escapism, you want to be wowed. Nobody does it better than Tom Cruise. He is putting the audience at the face of what he does. I
yeah.
know that some people have this really, I hate this horrible thing like, oh, why don't they make fake? Why don't, it's easy to blame Star Wars, right? But why don't they make films for fans? You're looking at things as a minority of a
If you
fan.
make films for fans, suddenly we end up with Rise of Skywalker, and that's just
Exactly. And Tom Cruise is a successful producer. He makes it for audiences, a
mm,
4 quadrant audience, which is the hardest thing to do. But he knows collectively, and this is why I love him. I love Nolan. The ones that are genuinely waving that flag for the cinema experience,
mm,
who are telling you have to go, get off your ass, go to the cinema, go sit down, go watch this. How upgrade and go to IMAX. They're not telling you to do it, they are showing you why you should be doing it. And for those, I will always back more than the lazy other studios that won't do that. And that's why, for whatever they want to do, I'm game for it. Whatever projects they're interested in, they know how to please audiences, not make films for them. They know
yeah,
how to elevate your cinema experience. And it's all these things that people forget about. They just jump to the, oh, I thought this film would be an ABC or a DEF. It wasn't any of these. That's not what they mean when they say they're making films for you. They're making
mm,
films for you, plural, the world, to go and see at a cinema. And this film is that, and you should. I mean, if you're a spoiler discussion, of course you've seen it by now. But if
yeah,
you want to go
exactly.
again, go again. Hey, you don't want to watch Barbie? You don't want to watch Oppenheimer? Mission Impossible is going to be playing right through to summer with those two. I guarantee you. When this
If
is said and
not,
done,
you
it
could
could be
always watch the
longer.
Meg 2.
Yeah, well, yeah, I won't be sharks, but it's it's quite not scary, but it's sort of like we've had this 1 month boom, like Indiana Jones, Mission
Yeah,
Impossible, Barbie, Oppenheimer. Then it's like, the Meg, Gran Turismo, Haunted Mansion, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles again for some reason.
it's yeah, weird point towards the end of summer for such a big summer blockbuster season. It's not really spread out. It's all kind of contained within this 1 month, which I'm okay with. I'm great for going out and watching the big films, and this is definitely one of the big films you need to see for the summer. If we're going into my final thoughts, go watch this film. Simply put, if you're a Mission Impossible fan, even if you're not a Mission Impossible fan, if you're a fan of action films, if you're a fan of proper cinema, the cinema experience, going out to the movies, then you need to go and watch this on the biggest screen possible. You need to go watch this in the best format possible. I'm really tempted. I'm really tempted to go watch this in 4DX because we don't have an IMAX where I live anymore. So I'm tempted to see what it's like in a different format because I want to kind of test the limits of that. It's an action film, so I'm sure it will be pretty.
4DX though, what's gonna happen at the start? They're gonna like drown you when the submarine
I was
goes.
going to say they're just going to spray you with water every like five
I,
seconds.
I
Like,
tell you this: Top Gun Maverick is the only 4DX film I've ever seen, and it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. Now I've seen the film loads, and this is where it works. If you do want to do a Dead Reckoning, It's got to be a film you've already seen because it's
Yeah.
very distracting. But at the right moments, it's a lot of fun. And I think this film will have sequences for it.
Like
Where it
any
would
of the
be,
car sequences, the spinning is going to be like
yeah,
insane.
it'll be like whiplash. Like you'll get literally like a whack to the side.
Yeah.
But like there's so many different things. You know, the cliff jump, they'll have the air going at you. There'll be a lot. So it could work. I think 4DX has it until Friday for Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
Which is a great transition. I mean,
God, Oppenheimer, you're going to just feel like a fucking nuclear
it's going to be
blast.
like Terminator 2, isn't it? The explosion. But I mean, do we want to talk box office really quickly?
Let's talk box office really quickly. Yeah,
it's had its opening weekend. It's on, I think, $235 million on a $200 million budget. American outlets shouting it's underperformed. So the reason why I'm telling everyone to take a pinch of salt, the Mission Impossible films do not perform like normal blockbusters. Neither did Top Gun Maverick. They don't open to gargantuan record-breaking numbers. They never have. They rely on the international audience, which this one has. This is open to
builds momentum.
Yeah, this is open to $80 million in America across 5 days. And you'll see reports from Variety saying it had a $50 million weekend. Doesn't really count if they open it 2 days before that weekend begins. So take all of the nonsense you've seen. It's the highest opening for a Mission Impossible film. It's the highest international opening of Tom Cruise's career. It's open to a bigger international number than Top Gun Maverick. 155 mil this has, that open to 130 mil. Obviously, Top Gun Maverick was the film of the summer last year. Last year, one of the worst summer blockbusters seasons in my lifetime, at least. Probably,
but it was saved by Top Gun.
Yeah, and Top Gun was on every single week, having insane numbers.
Do you wonder if this? Do you think this is going to have a deep run? Do you think this can outlast 100%. Oppenheimer and Barbie and just kind of there at the end of the summer as well?
Internationally, I don't know if I'm deluded for saying this. Barbie is not. I mean, Asia is a territory. Tom Cruise is mega in. This is opened insane in Asia. Now, I don't know if Barbie is going to open. I don't know Barbie's history. Is it a toilet or sold in these countries? I couldn't tell you. But what I can guarantee you right now is that next week it's clearly going to dip because the two big films coming out. This summer blockbuster season has been incredibly weird. Everyone's predictions aren't landing. So if anyone's being wild and telling you A, B, and C, it's not going to happen. This, I don't think, will hit $1 billion. It could if it performs amazingly for the next 8 weeks, but I don't think it will. I think this film is going to do incredibly well to get to a 700 to 800 million bracket mark. Fallout grossed $190 million in China in 2018. China doesn't allow American films to play as long as that anymore. So all I would say for anyone that sees numbers, that's curious about that, genuinely, none of us are going to know until the end of August. I know you reviewed Elemental last week. Yeah, Elemental's doing suddenly not really well. Yeah, it's bounced back this week.
It's doing better than The Flash, which is like what? It
and had Indiana Jones
openings. It had one of the worst openings in like recent memory for any film, and now it's bouncing really back on the internationals. So
and this is it. Anyone's lying to you if they're telling you they know how the summer blockbuster season is going to go. I'm just curious to follow it because we joked we had Transformers down as the biggest bomb, didn't we, or something like that. Transformers has made just under 400 mil. That's much higher than The Flash. That's much higher than Indiana Jones. That's much higher than Elemental. In Transformers, I mean, it's probably not made profit in that sense. Again, a delayed COVID film, but we didn't think it'd do that well. It's done well in certain territories. So if you're curious about box office numbers, just follow it week to week.
It's crazy that we've only had one film to break the $1 billion. And that film has been the Super Mario Brothers movie.
And here's an interesting one. So Neil from Get Your Comic On, who's been on the channel before, we're in a group chat this week, and he made a comment. I can't remember who he'd heard it from, but they're saying that the box office post-COVID, grossing 700 million is the new 1 billion. Grossing 400 million is the new 700 million. And like 200 million is the new 300 million. So basically, what they're implying is that it's not the fact that audiences aren't coming back. There's almost been a reset where it's not going to be where it was in the past.
Yeah.
And sorry, it isn't saying this is the new that. These are films that would have grossed that amount before COVID. So I just don't know what to expect. But what I know of this is that it's got a part 2 coming next year. And I think.
Well, is it coming next year?
That's the other big question. The big questions are, how much is there left to film? Because, of course, we've got the SAG strike, and I fully encourage people to read into that and why they are
Mm.
striking is not just pay. That's a very easy thing studios are building up towards. There's so much more happening there. So please read up on that. It's going to affect everything you watch on film and TV. I know a lot of people working who currently don't have projects anymore, other things like that. So it's very, very real. It's happening very quickly. I'm sure you've all seen about the Oppenheimer red carpet, but the industry's in a big question mark right now. How long it goes on for, none of us are going to know. Is Judy Head's going to sit down and sort it? None of us know. So I believe this was meant to resume filming in September. I don't think there's much to film at all left. They filmed most of it last year/this year. They took a big break, not because of the riot strike, because of promotion for this film. We don't know how much there's left to film. We don't know how much there's left to do in post. But is it going to make its June release date? I think it's got a hell of a better chance than Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, if I'm being completely honest. But we're in a predicament, aren't we, for the industry moving forward? Because a lot of things are about to get delayed, and a lot of things that were greenlit that we'd never heard of are never going to see the light of day now. So
exactly,
it's a very weird place to be in.
Yes, very unusual indeed. Well, I guess everyone can kind of follow. We won't be updating you with the news of it, but definitely go and follow our socials, for any updates on any videos about anything. We may chat more about it in our Untitled Movie Monthly show, where we talk random things about film and cinema. I think that's going to be a massive topic for this month, as if there wasn't enough to talk about anyway. We've got this film, we've got Barbie, we've got Oppenheimer. That's coming out at the end of next week. So we've got a crazy amount of things to talk about. So that's going to be a really interesting discussion. So keep an eye on the socials, because we're going to be, talking about those things, on a later date. So go follow us on Twitter and Instagram at cinema_savvy, Facebook and Letterboxd, Cinema Savvy, and go to the Redbubble link in the description as well.
Absolutely. And one last comment by Martin. Will the strike affect the quality of Reckoning Part 2? I don't think so. That script is written. That script is tight. It just really comes down to how much is left to film and what do they need to film. Is it a big stunt or is it a couple of smaller day shoots? That's what none of us know. So I think we'll be okay. But again, maybe these strikes are going to go for 6 months, then we're fucked. So it's a big unknown right now, and studios have got a lot to answer for. If you haven't seen Ron Perlman's Instagram, check that out. But aside from that, as Tayte, we've got a lot of stuff happening. There's so many things in the pipeline. It's a big week for cinema this week. And the monthly show will probably be talking more about numbers, and then in August it'll change again. So that's going to do it for this review. That's going to do it for the Mission Impossible videos. Again, thank you to everyone that's been watching across the series. It's gone for 7 weeks, to all of our amazing guests from all of the episodes, from people jumping on, from people commenting, to leaving us nice reviews, and to all the new faces that have joined us since then. We do appreciate it. We do thank you. We hope you've enjoyed the spoiler discussion. We know it's still very soon. It's only just opened, the film. And we hope we've been able to still do this review to the level we've done the others. But yeah, Mission Impossible will return next year, as will we covering Mission Impossible. We've got one big series starting end of August, the Denis Villeneuve Retrospective, and I need to figure out I need to make sure I'm pronouncing his surname correct by the time that starts. Yeah. I'm just going to get that out of the way now, because I keep thinking of Spanish pronunciation of Villeneuve. It's the French version, which I don't know. So yeah, there's going to be another retrospective, but franchise-wise, this has been the big one for this year. So once again, thank you to everyone that's watched this. And like I said, do join us next year for Dead Reckoning Part 2. Take care, and we'll see you then.